The clock on the kitchen wall showed 6:30 p.m., and Rosa was already running late. She grabbed her black uniform from the back of her bedroom chair and quickly put it on. The fabric was a bit worn from countless washes, but it was clean and pressed. Tonight was different from her usual shifts at the downtown diner. Tonight, she would be working at one of the city's fanciest hotels. Rosa had been working as a waitress for 2 years now, ever since she started college. The money wasn't great, but it helped pay for her small apartment and, most importantly, her piano lessons. Music had always been her passion, but studying it properly cost more money than her family could afford. So she worked, saved every penny she could, and practiced on the old piano in the college music room whenever she got the chance. As she walked to the bus stop, Rosa thought about how different this evening would be. Instead of serving coffee and sandwiches to tired office workers, she would be serving champagne and fancy appetizers to some of the richest people in the city. The Grand Metropolitan Hotel was hosting a charity event, and they needed extra staff for the evening. When her supervisor at the catering company called and offered her the job, Rosa jumped at the chance. The pay was double her usual rate. The bus ride to the hotel gave Rosa time to think. She pressed her face against the window and watched the city change as they moved from her neighborhood to the wealthy downtown area. The buildings got taller, the cars got nicer, and everything seemed to sparkle a little more. She wondered what it would be like to live in this world, where money wasn't something you worried about every single day. When Rosa arrived at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, she couldn't help but stare. The building was enormous, with marble columns and golden details that caught the light from the street lamps. She had never been inside such a fancy place. The doorman, dressed in a uniform that probably cost more than Rosa made in a month, nodded politely as she walked through the revolving door. Inside, the hotel was even more impressive. The lobby had a ceiling so high that Rosa had to crane her neck to see the top. Crystal chandeliers hung from above, casting rainbow patterns on the marble floor. Fresh flowers filled giant vases, and their sweet smell mixed with the scent of expensive perfume from the guests walking by. Rosa found her way to the staff entrance, where she met the other servers for the evening. Most of them were like her, students or people working second jobs to make ends meet. The event coordinator, a woman in her 40s wearing a sharp blue dress, gathered them all together for instructions. "Tonight's event is very important," she explained, her voice crisp and professional. "We're raising money for the city's youth music programs. These guests have paid a lot of money to be here, and they expect perfect service. Stay invisible, keep the glasses full, and don't interrupt any conversations." Rosa felt a flutter of excitement when she heard about the music programs. These were the same programs she couldn't afford to join. It felt strange to be serving the people who could easily pay for what she could only dream of having. The ballroom where the event was taking place took Rosa's breath away. It was like something out of a fairy tale. The ceiling was painted with scenes of angels and clouds, and massive crystal chandeliers hung down like frozen waterfalls. Round tables covered in white linen filled the room, each one set with more forks, knives, and glasses than Rosa had ever seen in one place. At the front of the room stood a beautiful black grand piano. It sat on a small stage, waiting silently under the warm lights. Rosa had played piano for most of her life, but only on old, beaten-up instruments. She had dreamed of playing a piano like this one, a real grand piano that would make her music sound rich and full. As the guests began to arrive, Rosa watched from her position near the kitchen doors. The women wore dresses that probably cost more than Rosa's rent, and their jewelry caught the light every time they moved. The men looked comfortable in their expensive suits, talking and laughing like they belonged in this world of luxury. Rosa began her work, moving between tables with trays of champagne and small appetizers. She tried to stay invisible, just like the coordinator had instructed, but she couldn't help listening to the conversations around her. Some guests talked about their vacation homes. Others discussed business deals worth millions of dollars. A few talked about their children's expensive private schools and music lessons. At one table, Rosa overheard a woman complaining about having to drive her daughter to piano lessons 3 times a week. "It's such a hassle," the woman said, adjusting her diamond bracelet. "But Richard insists she needs the best teacher in the city." Rosa bit her tongue and continued serving. She thought about her own piano lessons, 1 hour a week with Mrs. Chun, an elderly woman who charged half the normal rate because she believed every child should have access to music. Rosa practiced on her own time, using whatever piano she could find, because she couldn't afford to rent practice time. During a quiet moment, Rosa found herself standing near the grand piano. She was supposed to be refilling water glasses, but she couldn't help staring at the beautiful instrument. The wood was polished to a perfect shine, and the keys looked like they had never been touched. She wondered what it would feel like to play something so perfect. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Rosa jumped, startled by the voice. An older gentleman in a tuxedo was standing beside her, also looking at the piano. "Yes, sir," Rosa replied quickly, remembering she was supposed to be working. "I should get back to. Do you play?" he asked, ignoring her attempt to leave. Rosa hesitated. "A little, sir," the man smiled. "My wife was a pianist. She always said you could tell a real musician by the way they looked at an instrument. You have that look." Before Rosa could respond, the man walked away to join his table. Rosa felt her cheeks get warm. She hadn't realized she was being so obvious. As the evening continued, Rosa learned more about the event. The money being raised would help provide instruments and lessons for kids who couldn't afford them. It would fund after-school programs and summer camps where children could learn to love music the way Rosa did. These programs were exactly what Rosa had wished for. When she was younger, struggling to find ways to practice and learn, the irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, serving champagne to people who could easily afford to support these programs, while she herself was working multiple jobs just to pay for basic lessons. But Rosa didn't feel bitter about it. Instead, she felt grateful that at least some kids would get the opportunities she was still fighting for. Around 9 o'clock, Rosa noticed the event coordinator looking nervous. She kept checking her phone and whispering urgently to her assistant. Other staff members began to whisper among themselves. Something was wrong, but Rosa didn't know what. The evening was supposed to include a piano performance. That's why the grand piano was there. A famous pianist was scheduled to play, and the performance was meant to be the highlight of the night. But as Rosa watched the coordinator's worried face, she began to suspect that something had gone wrong with those plans. Rosa continued her work, but she kept glancing at the empty piano bench and the coordinator's increasingly stressed expression. Whatever was happening, it was clear that the evening wasn't going according to plan. And somehow, Rosa had a feeling that her quiet night of serving champagne was about to become something much more complicated. Rosa noticed the change in atmosphere around 9:15 p.m. The event coordinator, who had been calm and professional all evening, was now pacing back and forth near the stage. Her phone seemed permanently attached to her ear, and every few minutes she would shake her head and make another call. Rosa had been in the service industry long enough to recognize the signs of a major problem. While refilling water glasses at table 12, Rosa overheard part of a hushed conversation between 2 staff members from the hotel. "Did you hear what happened?" whispered the younger server, a college student who looked even more nervous than Rosa had felt when she first arrived. "No, what?" replied the other server, an experienced woman who had worked many events like this. "The pianist. There was an accident." Rosa's hand froze over the water pitcher. She pretended to be focused on her task, but her ears were straining to catch every word. "Is he okay?" the experienced server asked. "Yeah, he's fine, but his car got hit from behind at a red light." Nothing serious, but he's stuck dealing with police and insurance. He called to say he won't make it tonight. Rosa felt her stomach drop. She looked toward the beautiful grand piano sitting empty on the stage. And suddenly, everything made sense. The coordinator's panic, the urgent phone calls, the worried expressions on the staff's faces. They had 300 guests expecting a world-class piano performance, and no pianist to deliver it. As Rosa continued serving, she watched the coordinators' situation get worse by the minute. The woman was now making what seemed like desperate phone calls, and Rosa could catch fragments of conversations even from across the room. "Please, I know it's short notice, but we really need ... What do you mean everyone's booked tonight? Can't you cancel your other appointment? This is for charity ... Double quotes. Rosa felt genuinely sorry for the coordinator. She could see the woman's professional confidence cracking under the pressure. This wasn't just about one evening going wrong. This was about disappointing hundreds of wealthy donors who had paid premium prices for tickets. If the event failed, it would mean less money for the music programs that helped kids like Rosa. Around 9:30, Rosa was clearing plates from the appetizer course when she overheard a conversation that made her heart race. Two women at table 7 were discussing the situation, apparently having heard the news from someone connected to the event planning. "Such a shame about the pianist," said the first woman, a elegantly dressed lady with silver hair. "I was really looking forward to hearing some Chopin tonight." "I know," replied her companion, adjusting her pearl necklace. "My daughter is in one of the music programs this fundraiser supports. The kids were so excited to hear there would be a real concert pianist performing tonight. Some of them have never heard classical music played live on a grand piano." Rosa's hands trembled slightly as she continued clearing the table. She knew those pieces. Chopin was one of her favorite composers. She had spent countless hours practicing his waltzes and nocturnes on the old piano at school. But knowing the music and performing it in front of 300 wealthy strangers were completely different things. The coordinator was now standing near the kitchen entrance, and Rosa could see tears threatening to spill from her eyes. She was on the phone with what seemed like her last hope. "I understand you're at another event, but is there any way?" "No, I completely understand. Thank you anyway." As she hung up, the coordinator leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Her assistant, a young man who looked fresh out of college, approached her with a clipboard. "Should we make an announcement?" he asked quietly. "Let the guests know there's been a change in the program?" The coordinator opened her eyes, and Rosa could see the defeat in them. "I don't know what else to do. We've called everyone, every pianist, every music teacher, even some of the advanced students from the conservatory. Everyone who's any good is either already performing somewhere else tonight or lives too far away to get here in time." Rosa felt her heart pounding. She wanted to help, but the very thought of walking up to that stage in front of all these people made her feel sick. These weren't her usual diner customers who barely looked up from their newspapers. These were some of the most important people in the city, people who knew what real classical music should sound like. But as she watched the coordinator struggle, Rosa thought about all the kids who would miss out on music programs if this fundraiser failed. She thought about her younger self, dreaming of piano lessons she couldn't afford. She thought about Mrs. Chun, her piano teacher, who always said that music was meant to be shared, not hidden away. The dinner service continued, but the mood in the room was starting to shift. Some guests had obviously heard about the situation, and Rosa could see small groups whispering together at their tables. The coordinator was trying to maintain her professional composure, but word was spreading that something was wrong with the evening's program. At 9:45, Rosa was serving coffee when she heard the coordinator make what sounded like a final, desperate call. "Hello, this is Linda from Sterling Events. I know this is incredibly last minute, but we have an emergency situation." "What? Oh no, I had no idea you were in Europe this week." I'm so sorry to bother you." When she hung up, the coordinator, Linda, looked completely defeated. She walked over to her assistant and spoke in a voice loud enough for Rosa to hear from her position nearby. "That was my last contact. Professor Williams from the university is in London for a conference. I don't know what we're going to tell these people. We promised them a piano performance, and we have nothing." Rosa set down her coffee pot with shaking hands. She had been playing piano for 15 years, ever since her grandmother had taught her the basics on an old keyboard when she was 7. She had studied with Mrs. Chen for 3 years and had even won a small competition at the community center last year. But performing in front of wealthy donors at a charity gala was way beyond anything she had ever imagined doing. Still, as she looked around the room at all the people who had paid to support music education, she felt a responsibility she couldn't ignore. These programs would help kids who were just like she had been, talented, but without the money for proper training. If the fundraiser failed because there was no entertainment, those kids would be the ones who suffered. Rosa watched Linda check the time on her phone again. It was almost 10 p.m., and the performance was scheduled to begin in just 15 minutes. Soon, Linda would have to walk up to that microphone and disappoint 300 people who had come out on a Friday night to support a good cause. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Rosa. Here she was, a young woman who had spent years dreaming of playing on a stage like this, watching the opportunity slip away because nobody knew she existed. All around her were people talking about the importance of music education, while she, someone who desperately needed that education, stood invisible in her server's uniform. Rosa took a deep breath and made a decision that would change everything. She set down her coffee pot, smoothed her apron, and began walking toward Linda. Her heart was beating so fast she was sure people could hear it, but she forced herself to keep moving. She had no idea what she was going to say, but she knew she had to try. Rosa's legs felt like jelly as she walked toward Linda. Every step seemed to take forever, and she could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. What was she thinking? She was just a waitress, a college student who played piano in her spare time. These people expected a professional, someone with years of training and experience performing in front of crowds. But as she got closer to Linda, Rosa saw something that made her keep walking. The coordinator was holding a tissue, and Rosa realized she had been crying. The strong, professional woman who had been running the entire evening was falling apart because she couldn't find a solution to save the fundraiser. "Excuse me, ma'am." Rosa's voice came out as barely a whisper. Linda looked up, surprised to see one of the servers approaching her. "Yes? Is there a problem with the service?" Rosa's mouth felt dry. "No, ma'am, it's just I couldn't help but overhear about the pianist situation." She paused, trying to find the right words. "I know this might sound crazy, but I study piano. I've been playing for 15 years. Linda's expression changed from confusion to something that might have been hope, but Rosa could see the doubt there too. Linda looked at Rosa's server uniform, her young face, her nervous hands. "You play piano?" Linda asked carefully. "Yes, ma'am." "I know it's not the same as hiring a professional, but I heard some of the pieces mentioned for tonight's program. I've practiced Chopin's Minute Waltz, and I know several other classical pieces. I'm not saying I'm as good as whoever you hired, but—" Rosa's voice trailed off. She could see Linda studying her, trying to decide if this was a real solution or just a desperate girl who didn't understand what she was offering. "Honey," Linda said gently, "this isn't like playing at a school recital. These people have heard some of the best pianists in the world. They know what professional classical music sounds like." Rosa felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Linda was right, of course. What had she been thinking? These wealthy guests probably went to symphony concerts regularly. They would know immediately if someone wasn't good enough. "I understand," Rosa said, starting to back away. "I just thought maybe ... Wait. Linda caught Rosa's arm gently. I didn't mean to discourage you. It's just, can you really play well enough for an audience like this? Rosa thought about all the hours she had spent practicing, all the times Mrs. Chun had made her play the same piece over and over until it was perfect. She thought about the small competition she had won last year, where the judge had said she played with unusual feeling for someone so young. I think so, Rosa said quietly. I mean, I've never played for people like this before. But I love classical music. I've been studying it for years, even though I can't afford formal lessons very often. Something in Rosa's voice must have convinced Linda, because the coordinator's expression changed. What pieces do you know? From memory, I mean. You wouldn't have sheet music up there. Rosa's heart started beating faster. I know Chopin's Minute. Waltz really well. I also know Debussy's Clair de Lune. And I've been working on Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor, though that one's harder. Linda's eyes widened. Those are exactly the pieces that were on tonight's program. You know, all three of them? Yes, ma'am. They're some of my favorites. Linda looked around the ballroom, at all the guests finishing their dinner and expecting entertainment soon. She looked at her assistant, who was hovering nearby with a worried expression. Then she looked back at Rosa. What's your name, honey? Rosa Martinez. Rosa, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. If I let you try this, and it doesn't go well, it's not just embarrassing for you. It could ruin the entire fundraiser. These people donated a lot of money to be here tonight, and if they feel like they didn't get what they paid for, they might not support this cause again. That means less money for music programs, fewer kids getting the chance to learn instruments. Rosa felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She wasn't just risking her own embarrassment anymore. She was risking the future of programs that helped kids like her. But, Linda continued, if we don't try something, the evening is definitely ruined. At least this way, there's a chance. Rosa nodded slowly. I understand. Are you sure you can do this? Really sure? Rosa thought about her grandmother, who had first taught her to play piano on an old keyboard that was missing 3 keys. She thought about Mrs. Chun, who had seen something special in Rosa's playing and had reduced her lesson fees because she believed every talented child deserved a chance. She thought about all the young musicians who might benefit from tonight's fundraiser. Yes, Rosa said, and this time her voice was stronger. I can do this. Linda studied Rosa's face for a long moment. Okay, but we're going to do a sound check first. I want to hear you play at least part of one piece before I let you go out there in front of everyone. Rosa's stomach flipped. Even a private audition felt terrifying, but she knew it was fair. Of course. Linda called her assistant over. David, I need you to clear the area around the piano for a few minutes. Tell the staff to keep busy with coffee service, but don't let any guests near the stage. As David hurried away, Linda turned back to Rosa. What you're wearing won't work for a performance. You're about the same size as my assistant coordinator. She has a black dress in the staff room that might fit you. But first, let's hear you play. They walked toward the piano together, and Rosa felt like she was in a dream. The beautiful grand piano looked even more intimidating up close. The wood was so perfectly polished that Rosa could see her reflection in it. The keys looked pristine, like they had never been touched. Go ahead, Linda said softly. Play whatever you feel most confident about. Rosa sat on the piano bench and adjusted her position. Her hands were shaking slightly as she placed them on the keys. She took a deep breath and tried to remember everything Mrs. Chun had taught her about performing. Don't think about the audience, her teacher always said. Think about the music. Let the music speak through you. Rosa closed her eyes for a moment and began to play Chopin's Minute Waltz. The first notes rang out clear and strong, filling the space around the piano with beautiful sound. As she played, Rosa felt her nervousness begin to fade away. This was why she loved music. When she played, everything else disappeared. There was only the piano, the music, and the feeling of bringing something beautiful into the world. She played about half of the piece before stopping and looking up at Linda. The coordinator's expression had completely changed. Her mouth was slightly open, and she was staring at Rosa like she was seeing her for the first time. "My God," Linda whispered. "You're really good. I mean, you're really, really good." Rosa felt a flutter of hope. "You think it's okay?" "Okay, Rosa, that was beautiful. Where did you learn to play like that?" "Just lessons here and there, and lots of practice," Rosa said modestly. Linda shook her head in amazement. "We're going to do this. David," she called to her assistant, "find Rosa something appropriate to wear. We have a pianist." 10 minutes later, Rosa stood in the staff room looking at herself in the mirror. The black dress Linda's assistant had found fit her almost perfectly, and someone had even brought her a pair of simple black shoes to replace her work sneakers. But Rosa barely recognized the young woman staring back at her. Just an hour ago, she had been invisible, moving quietly between tables with trays of food. Now she was about to walk onto a stage in front of 300 of the city's most important people. Her hands were shaking as she tried to smooth down her hair. Linda appeared behind her in the mirror. "You look perfect," Linda said, but Rosa could hear the nervousness in her voice too. "Are you ready for this?" Rosa turned around. "I think so. But what if I mess up? What if I forget the music halfway through?" "Then you start over, or you play something else," Linda said firmly. "Rosa, I've seen a lot of performers over the years, and you have something special. Trust yourself." As they walked back toward the ballroom, Rosa could hear the buzz of conversation from the guests. Dinner was over, and people were settling in for the evening's entertainment. Some were refilling their wine glasses, others were checking their phones, and a few were already looking toward the stage expectantly. Linda stepped up to the microphone at the front of the room. The conversations gradually died down as people realized the program was about to begin. "Good evening, everyone," Linda's voice carried clearly through the sound system. "Thank you all for joining us tonight to support our city's youth music programs. I know you're all eager to hear some beautiful music, and we have a very special treat for you tonight." Rosa stood at the side of the stage, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Linda continued her introduction. "Due to some unexpected circumstances, we have a change in tonight's program. Instead of our originally scheduled performer, we're delighted to present a young pianist who embodies everything these music programs represent. Please welcome Rosa Martinez." The applause was polite but uncertain. Rosa could see people leaning forward in their seats, trying to get a better look at this unknown performer. Some were whispering to their companions, probably wondering who she was and why they had never heard of her. Rosa walked across the stage, and the room felt enormous. The lights were warm on her face, but beyond the stage, the audience seemed to stretch on forever. She could see faces in the front rows, some curious, some skeptical, some simply waiting to see what would happen. As she sat down at the piano bench, Rosa tried to remember everything Mrs. Chun had taught her about performing. "The audience wants you to succeed," her teacher had always said. "They came to hear beautiful music, and they're hoping you'll give it to them." Rosa adjusted the bench and placed her hands on the keys. The piano felt different from any instrument she had ever played. The keys responded to even the lightest touch, and she could tell that every note would ring out clearly and purely. This was what a real piano was supposed to feel like. She took a deep breath and began with Chopin's Minute Waltz. The opening notes danced out into the room, light and playful. Rosa had always loved this piece because it felt like musical laughter, full of joy and energy. As her fingers moved across the keys, she began to forget about the audience. There was only the music flowing through her hands and filling the beautiful ballroom. About 30 seconds into the piece, Rosa noticed that the room had gone completely silent. No one was coughing, no glasses were clinking, no one was whispering. The only sound was the piano, and every person in the room was listening. As she played, Rosa felt her confidence growing. The piano was responding beautifully to her touch, and the music sounded richer and fuller than she had ever heard it before. She had practiced this piece hundreds of times, but it had never sounded like this. When she reached the dramatic middle section, her hands flew across the keys with precision and grace. When the last note of the minute waltz faded away, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the applause began, and Rosa looked up in surprise. People weren't just clapping politely anymore. They were sitting forward in their seats, and many had huge smiles on their faces. She heard someone say, "Wow," and saw others nodding appreciatively. But Rosa wasn't done yet. She had planned to play 3 pieces, just like the original program had promised. Without pausing for too long, she transitioned into Debussy's Clair de Lune. This piece was completely different from the Chopin, softer, more mysterious, like moonlight dancing on water. As the gentle melody began, Rosa watched the audience's faces change. The playfulness from the first piece was replaced by something deeper. Some people closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others sat very still, as if they were afraid to break the spell the music was creating. Rosa had always felt a special connection to this piece. When she played it, she thought about quiet nights and peaceful moments, about beauty that existed even in the darkness. As her hands moved gently across the keys, she could feel that the audience was with her, experiencing the same sense of calm and wonder. The second piece ended to even stronger applause. Rosa could see people turning to each other with surprised expressions, as if they couldn't believe what they were hearing. In the front row, she noticed an elderly woman wiping tears from her eyes. For her final piece, Rosa had chosen Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. This was the most challenging piece she knew, with dramatic, powerful sections that required both technical skill and emotional depth. It was a risky choice. If she was going to make a mistake, it would probably be in this piece. But as Rosa began the famous opening chords, she felt completely in control. The music seemed to flow through her naturally, as if she had been born to play it. The piece began quietly, almost mysteriously, then built to moments of incredible power and drama. Rosa's whole body moved with the music, and she played with a passion she had never felt before. During the most intense section of the piece, Rosa caught a glimpse of the audience. People were leaning forward, completely absorbed in what they were hearing. Some had their mouths open in amazement. She saw phones being pulled out to record, and people nudging their companions to make sure they weren't missing anything. As the piece built to its dramatic conclusion, Rosa felt like she was pouring her whole heart into the piano. Every dream she had ever had about being a real musician, every hour she had spent practicing on old instruments, every sacrifice she had made to afford lessons, it all came together in these final moments. The last chord rang out into the silent ballroom, and for several seconds, no one moved. Rosa sat at the piano, breathing hard, hardly believing what had just happened. Then the audience exploded into applause. People weren't just clapping. They were standing up, cheering, some even shouting, "Bravo!" Rosa stood up from the piano bench and looked out at the crowd of people on their feet, applauding enthusiastically. She had never experienced anything like this before. These weren't her friends or family members being supportive. These were strangers who had been moved by her music, people who knew quality when they heard it. As the applause continued, Rosa felt tears starting to form in her eyes. She had done it. She had actually done it. The applause seemed to go on forever. Rosa stood at the piano, still trying to process what had just happened. She had expected polite clapping, maybe some encouraging smiles. Instead, she was looking at 300 people on their feet, cheering, like she had just given the performance of a lifetime. As the applause finally began to die down, Rosa saw Linda walking onto the stage with a huge smile on her face. The coordinator looked like she might cry from relief and joy. "Ladies and gentlemen," Linda said into the microphone, "I think we can all agree that Rosa Martinez has given us something truly special tonight." The applause started up again, and Rosa felt her cheeks burning. She had never been the center of attention like this before. In her regular life, she tried to blend into the background, to be helpful without being noticed. Now hundreds of eyes were focused on her, and people were treating her like she was someone important. "Rosa," Linda continued, "would you mind telling our guests a little about yourself? I think they'd love to know more about the young woman who just moved us all to tears." Rosa approached the microphone nervously. Public speaking had never been easy for her, especially not in front of people like this. But after what she had just accomplished at the piano, talking felt manageable. "Hi everyone," Rosa began, her voice shaky but getting stronger. "I'm sorry, I'm not used to speaking in front of groups like this. I'm a college student, and I work as a waitress to help pay for school and for piano lessons. Music has always been the most important thing in my life, but I've never had the chance to play for people like you before." She paused, looking out at the faces in the audience. They were all listening intently, hanging on every word. "When I heard about the situation tonight, I just wanted to help. The programs this fundraiser supports are exactly the kind of thing I needed when I was younger. I know what it's like to love music, but not have the money for proper lessons or good instruments. If my playing tonight can help even one kid get the chance to learn music, then I'm happy." The audience erupted in applause again, but this time, Rosa could see something different in their faces. It wasn't just appreciation for her musical skill, it was something deeper. They were moved by her story, by the fact that this talented young woman had been serving their dinner just hours before. Invisible and unnoticed as Rosa stepped back from the microphone, she saw people throughout the room pulling out their phones. Some were making calls, others were typing quickly. She wondered what they were doing, but her attention was quickly drawn to a group of people approaching the stage. The first person to reach her was the elderly woman from the front row, the one Rosa had seen wiping away tears during the Debussy. "Peace, my dear," the woman said, taking Rosa's hands in hers. "That was absolutely beautiful. I'm Dr. Catherine Morrison. I used to be on the board of the City Conservatory of Music. I haven't heard playing like that from someone your age, in Kofo, of the board of the City Conservatory of Music. Years." Rosa's eyes widened. The City Conservatory was the most prestigious music school in the area, the kind of place Rosa had only dreamed of attending. "Thank you," Rosa managed to say. "That means so much coming from you. How long have you been playing?" Dr. Morrison asked. "About 15 years, but I've only had formal lessons for the past 3 years. I can't afford more than 1 lesson a week." Dr. Morrison shook her head in amazement. "Incredible! You have natural talent that can't be taught, combined with obvious dedication and hard work. Have you ever considered applying to the conservatory?" Rosa felt her heart sink a little. "I'd love to, but the tuition is way beyond what my family can afford. Even with financial aid, it would still be too much." Dr. Morrison smiled mysteriously. "We'll see about that." Before Rosa could ask what she meant, another person approached. This was a well-dressed man in his 60s who looked vaguely familiar. "Rosa, I'm James Patterson. I own several music venues in the city, including the concert hall downtown. I'd like to talk to you about performing there." Rosa couldn't believe what she was hearing. The concert hall downtown was where all the famous musicians performed when they came to the city. She had walked past it many times, dreaming of what it would be like to play on that stage. Really. Rosa stammered. "Really," Mr. Patterson said with a smile. "What you did tonight was special. People don't forget performances like that." As more people gathered around Rosa, she began to understand that something incredible was happening. These weren't just Polite congratulations. These people were serious about helping her pursue her musical dreams. Linda appeared at Rosa's side with a huge grin. "Rosa, I think you should know, we've already raised more money tonight than we ever expected. People have been calling in additional donations ever since you finished playing. Your performance inspired them to give more than they had originally planned." Rosa felt tears starting to form in her eyes again. "Really? Really? In fact, we've already exceeded our fundraising goal by almost double. That means a lot more kids are going to get music lessons and instruments next year." The next hour was a blur of conversations and introductions. Rosa met music teachers, professional musicians, business owners, and arts patrons. Each person seemed to have something different to offer: performance opportunities, lesson recommendations, scholarship information, or just encouragement. But the moment that changed everything came when Dr. Morrison returned with a small group of people Rosa didn't recognize. "Rosa," Dr. Morrison said, "I'd like you to meet some of my colleagues from the conservatory board. We've been talking, and we'd like to offer you something." Rosa's heart started pounding again. "We want to offer you a full scholarship to the City Conservatory of Music, not just tuition, everything. Room, board, lessons, access to practice rooms and instruments. Everything you need to develop your talent properly." Rosa felt like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "I'm sorry, what?" One of the other board members, a kind-looking woman with gray hair, stepped forward. "We've been looking for a student who has both exceptional talent and the kind of character you've shown tonight. Someone who understands the value of music education because they've had to fight for it. We think you're exactly what we've been looking for." Rosa looked around at all the faces surrounding her. Linda, Dr. Morrison, the conservatory board members, Mr. Patterson, and dozens of other people who had stayed to meet her. A few hours ago, these people hadn't even known she existed. Now they were offering to change her entire life. "I don't know what to say," Rosa whispered. "Say yes," Dr. Morrison said with a warm smile. "Say yes, and let us help you become the musician you're meant to be." Rosa thought about her grandmother, who had first taught her to play piano. She thought about Mrs. Chun, who had believed in her talent when no one else even knew about it. She thought about all the young musicians who would benefit from tonight's fundraiser, and about the little girl she used to be, dreaming of playing beautiful music for people who would really listen. "Yes," Rosa said, her voice getting stronger. "Yes, absolutely yes." The applause that followed was different from the ovations after her performance. This was celebration, pure and simple. People were cheering, not just for what Rosa had accomplished tonight, but for what she would accomplish in the future. 6 months later, Rosa walked onto the stage at Carnegie Hall for her debut recital. In the audience, she could see many of the same faces from that charity gala: Dr. Morrison, Mr. Patterson, Linda, and even some of the guests who had been moved by her unexpected performance that night. As Rosa sat down at another beautiful grand piano, she thought about the amazing journey that had brought her to this moment. It had all started with a decision to help when help was needed, and the courage to share her gift with the world. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play, knowing that this was just the beginning of everything she had dreamed of becoming.